Hello, I'm George Harrison, the Backyard Birdwatcher. Here at my home in Wisconsin, I've created a successful bird garden. By planting flowers and trees and shrubs, I've given the birds a habitat, a natural habitat in which they can feel comfortable and reproduce. But I'm not alone. There are wonderful bird gardens all over North America. And each region has its unique habitat and the birds that it attracts. But they all have the same thing in common: cover, food, and water. Now come with me on a trip across North America to visit bird gardens and garden birds. We'll travel to the searing Sonoran Desert in Arizona, and then to New England to a cool formal garden in Connecticut, followed by a visit to a high Rocky Mountain garden in Colorado, and on to an antebellum garden in the Deep South. Then we're off to the dry chaparral, Southern California. Finally, we'll wind up in this Midwestern lake country bird garden of mine. So with binoculars and bird book in hand, we're off to see Garden Birds of America. You might not expect to find a lot of birds in the middle of the Sonoran Desert, but in fact the desert is a very rich environment and there are birds everywhere. The desert does present some interesting challenges to bird gardeners, but with the right kind of cover, food, and particularly water, you can build a beautiful bird garden. We found one near Phoenix that is a beauty. In Paradise Valley, we visited the desert garden of Bill and Jan Frieder. Our guide was Christy Tonight, the landscape architect who designed this desert gem. When we drove in, we could hardly see the house through the thick desert vegetation, but that made the property all the more inviting to birds. Christy, it's so hard to believe we're in the middle of Phoenix here. This is the natural desert.
It is. You know, this area where this house is one of the last remaining areas of nice desert in urban Phoenix.
And the saguaros, were they here?
They were all here. And I mean, how lucky to have such incredible cactus on the property.
Look at this guy here. There's a cactus wren nest right on that side.
Right.
And there's some Gila woodpecker holes on the other side. I'll bet there's an elf owl nesting in there as well.
Could be. You can really see why they call these saguaros bird hotels.
Oh,
with
yes.
all the various levels of birds living next to each other.
It's the Gila woodpeckers with their chisel-like bills that create most of the rooms in the bird hotels. They also consume the flowers and fruits of the saguaro. Gila males sport a round red cap on the tops of their heads. Otherwise, the sexes look alike. A pair normally raises 4 to 5 noisy youngsters in each brood. Another tenant of the bird hotel is the cactus wren that may nest in an arm of the saguaro and also feast on the flowers and the red fruits of the cactus. The largest of all wrens, the noisy and nosy cactus, is well named because it spends its entire life in cactus of one kind or another. This desert bird garden is well populated with doves, the mourning and white-wing being the largest and most vocal. Both doves eat the flowers and fruits of the saguaros and use the huge arms as sentinel posts from which to watch the comings and goings in the bird garden below. Curve-billed thrashers also find the saguaro a great source of food, and fiber too, from which to fashion nests. This pair was gathering material from the saguaro to build a nest in a cholla cactus below. Even the thrasher nestlings thrive on the diet of saguaro fruit. Here, a mother snacks on the wholesome fruit herself while protecting her nestlings from the hot desert sun.
And we're coming up through the transition garden to the front of the house. This is perfect bird habitat, and we're walking through creosote here, which has this unbelievable smell after a rain. It's just a clean, beautiful scent. And it also provides cover for the birds.
It's in the creosote that we find Gambel's quail. In early spring, the clarion whistle of the male Gambel's is heard from the desert garden as paired birds leave the covey to begin nesting in the shade of the desert trees and shrubs. Also under the desert shrubbery is the greater roadrunner. This cartoon character, a chicken-like bird that is mostly tail, feet, and head, that speeds down the highway calling beep beep and outwits coyotes, is actually based on fact. The real roadrunner may be seen racing across the desert at full speed after a lizard, throws up its tail and changes course, then plunges headlong into a clump of cactus and emerges with its limp victim in tow. This beloved, respected, and amusing bird is a symbol of the desert. Its taste for lizards and snakes makes it a very welcome bird in many gardens. This is the main entrance, isn't it?
Right, this is the main entry to the courtyard. It's really the front door of the house.
How surprised I was by the change in the climate inside the courtyard. I asked Christy to explain.
I like to think of it as kind of a canyon microclimate. Because of the sheltering walls of the house and the fact that we brought in these large canopy desert trees, we've created a much cooler environment than, say, out by the street where it isn't sheltered. And so we can really kind of recreate canyon plantings within a home like this.
And you've done that, and the birds follow, don't they?
Yes.
The birds are here, and the birds that are inside this interior area are birds that would be in a canyon environment, aren't they?
Yes.
And we've seen quite a few hummingbirds around here, just buzzing around all over the place. It's quite exciting. And it's so typical. The males, of course, are chasing the females and other males away from their feeding ground. So I think probably what happens is the hummingbirds establish their little corner of this canyon, this interior courtyard, as their feeding area and keep the other birds, the other hummingbirds away. So they're fighting all the time, aren't they?
Yes. The trees, the combination of the trees and the sheltering walls of the home, and just really create a shady, pleasant environment for both birds and humans. Right. It's just kind of taking a cue from natural areas of Arizona and on a smaller scale recreating that at a home garden.
Now let's go to New England and drop in on a beautiful bird garden in central Connecticut. We visited the superbly designed garden of Bob and Beth Von Dolan of West Hartford. By planting beautiful flowers and shrubs in front of deep woodland, they had created a birding paradise. Beth, you've lived here for 30 years or more now, haven't you?
It will be 30 years this summer.
Uh-huh.
When we first came, I had small children and not a lot of time for gardening, so over the years the woods grew in on us, and finally about 3 years ago we decided to push the woods back and create a garden for ourselves.
And then what happened with the birds at that point?
Now they've come and they're enjoying the garden with us.
Well, this looks like good cover here, Beth.
This is a Hinoki cypress, and the birds love to hide in there. The chipping sparrow has a nest some years right up in here.
Oh, yeah. A small garden evergreen is the site of most chipping sparrow nests. Named for its song, the chipping sparrow is among the tamest of garden birds. Anytime there's work to be done in the garden, the chippies seem to be around as friendly companions. Male chippies, arriving in the north in April, set up small territories inside bird gardens. When the females arrive a week or so later, the nesting season begins. Young chippies are out of the nest in a few weeks, allowing the parents to produce a second brood before the family flies south at the end of summer. Well, we have some food-producing plants here, I see.
Yes, we have viburnum right here that will have berries in the winter, and red osier dogwood.
These kinds of food-producing shrubs are enjoyed by a legion of migratory birds in fall and spring. Lovely birds like the white-throated sparrow, whose song is a delicate and plaintive whistle, a delight to garden birders. They may be confused with the aristocratic-looking white-crowned sparrows that migrate through the same gardens some 2 weeks earlier. What do I see up here on the tree?
Well, this is my wren house. I have had that for 2 years now, and this year the wrens took up residence in there.
Put up 10 bird houses in the garden, and by June 1, they will all be filled with sticks. This is the work of a male house wren, a drab little brown bundle of energy. He takes the female on a tour of the housing possibilities, upon which he has already put down a deposit of sticks. And so it goes with house wrens in bird gardens across America. I hear a wood thrush back here.
Oh, yes, he's
Singing,
wonderful.
right? Oh,
He's
how
usually
fortunate
out
you are.
early in the morning and late in the afternoon.
As the flute-like notes of a wood thrush herald the dawning of a new day, the dew-drenched woodland surrounding the garden becomes a cathedral. The dawn chorus of the wood thrush is possibly the most beautiful music in all of nature. Their caroling aside, wood thrushes are lovely quiet birds that come and go on silent wings from gardens to damp woodlands. They raise their 4 youngsters in a nest of mud and grasses. I hear a catbird up there, Beth. They love this edge.
They certainly do. I read somewhere that if you want to have a garden for birds, you need a lot of edges because birds love edges.
Oh, indeed they do.
I think you want to notice this tree. It has red berries. It's called a shadblow. I think that's because it blooms when the shad run in the spring.
Ah, right.
It is a native plant, and it's fairly hardy. Not much attacks it, which is always nice.
And who
the
eats that?
cardinal's already been in there.
Has
you
he?
can see some of them are turning red already.
It's food for cedar waxwings as well. In fact, cedar waxwings are great berry pickers. Sometimes they will even pass a berry between their bills. Cedar waxwings are among the most exquisite of songbirds, not bright and flashy, but sleek and elegant. Notice the bead of red on the tip of each wing, their waxwing. They also have an unusual system for feeding their nestlings. The parent birds fill their crops with fruits and berries, and then back at the nest regurgitate the cargo, one item at a time, into the gaping mouths of the youngsters. Is that a robin shelter on the corner?
Yes, it is. Last year we had a robin's nest up here on this horizontal beam, and we really got used to each other. I'd be out tending the orchids, and she'd be looking down at me to make sure I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And when the water went on, no matter where she was, she came back and sheltered the little ones with her wings.
Oh, how nice.
So that they wouldn't get wet. It was a lot of fun. I really missed them when they left.
The male arrives from the south first, the first robin of spring. He establishes a territory and defends it against all other males. Then the female arrives, in search of the perfect male with the best territory. She hears the male's caroling song. She considers his song, his territory, his appearance. This is the male for her. Soon she builds a nest of mud and grass and lays 3 or 4 eggs. Together they raise 1 or 2 broods, continuing the life cycle of the American robin, the continent's most popular garden bird. I hear a scarlet tanager singing, Beth.
Yes, there's a lot of them back there in the reservoir area.
reddest of all redbirds, with black wings and tail, the male scarlet tanager is one of the most beautiful garden birds in North America. Yet despite its brilliant scarlet color, it is a shy bird that hides in the canopies of trees as it sings a caroling song that sounds like a robin with a sore throat. Scarlet tanagers are also very secretive about the location of their nests in a tree high above the garden. The female's colors help her blend into the forest habitat. Beth, this beautiful garden requires a lot of work. Why do you do it?
Well, I guess I do it for my own satisfaction, and we enjoy it so much. It's like our outdoor living room in the summer. And we sit at the breakfast table with the binoculars, and anything that moves, we say, "What's that?" It's just very exciting to be in such a natural paradise and enjoy it with the birds.
The climate in the high Rockies presents some special challenges to bird gardeners. The winters are cold and windy and a lot of snow, and the summers are dry. But we found a couple of bird gardeners in Boulder, Colorado that have solved these problems and have great gardens. On the Front Range of the Rockies, we visited the Boulder garden of John and Ann Cooper. We were surprised at how dense and green it was, and the birds loved it. And this is lovely, really beautiful.
Thank you.
What inspired you to create this?
Probably a little bit of a thought that I was recreating an English cottage garden.
Right.
And when I first came, I was very homesick for the rain. My inclination was to be so proud when things grew that I couldn't bear to cut them back at all. You won't know on a day like this when it's overcast just how hot and miserable to an English woman the Colorado climate can be, and that's when you really need a pond area and a wetland. We've had good success with it. We've had about 8 to 6 species turn up here over the years, and some of them have been unusual. The ones that give me most delight are things like the western tanager and lazuli bunting are up the back, occasionally an indigo bunting.
When the naturalist Elliott Cowes saw the lazuli bunting in 1882, he described the bird as delightful, charming, and dressy. It was a fitting description of this lovely bunting of the West. Lazulis spend most of their lives in the low thickets, feeding on insects and seeds. Yet the males pause frequently on the tallest stalks and burst forth with song. A close relative of the lazuli is the indigo bunting. In fact, scientists believe that the two buntings have a common ancestor. Where they share ranges, as in Colorado, they may hybridize. Hot summer afternoons in the bird garden are made lovely by the lazy rhythm of either bunting's song. Female indigos have only a hint of that dazzling blue. So little, in fact, that they seem like plain brown sparrows. Farther along the Front Range, Jim Knopf developed a different kind of bird garden. An open, dry habitat allowed Knopf to experiment with some water conservation techniques. He planted native species and trapped rainwater, and the birds responded.
Among the most interesting things right away were the penstemons that are back there. Penstemons being native in this region, a lot of them in this area. Right away I started getting hummingbirds for the first time in the garden. I could hear them before flying overhead, but they wouldn't come down into the garden.
It seems that everyone in Colorado feeds broad-tailed hummingbirds. Even tourists in campgrounds set up sugar water feeders, and the hummers appear. Males of this Rocky Mountain species are distinguished from other hummingbirds by the loud buzzing sound made by their wings when they fly. Eastern visitors may notice how much like ruby-throated hummingbirds are the male broadtails with their ruby throats, emerald green backs, and white bellies. Offer sunflower seeds in a high Rockies bird garden, and there's a good chance that a male black-headed grosbeak will flutter in. A female may join him. Using their heavy conical bills, they efficiently crack the sunflower seeds. These entirely western grosbeaks are typically tame and slow-moving around bird gardens. The male's lovely robin-like song with trills and short phrases is a delight to hear. Bird gardens in mountain meadows will attract birds of a different stripe. If ever there was a bird of deception, it's the killdeer. They are best known for their deceptive broken wing acts, which they perform to lead predators away from their nest. They are even deceptive about their nest, because they don't build one. They simply lay their 4 eggs in gravel that looks exactly like the eggs. The western meadowlark, another meadow garden bird, is not deceptive at all. In fact, its beautiful, bubbling, flute-like song is there for everyone to hear and enjoy. In the deep south, in the land of Gone with the Wind, where magnolias and azaleas are king, gardens are thriving with birds. Birds are everywhere, and the gardens are beautiful. We found one such garden north of Atlanta. From the moment we arrived in the garden of Bruce and Barbara Perry, we knew we were in the deep south. Oh, Barbara, what a beautiful southern bird garden you have here.
Well, thanks a lot and welcome to Marietta.
I can certainly tell that it is Georgia with these loblollies and all this beautiful southern cover that you have.
Well, when we initially moved in, there was a lot of brush back here, a lot of natural wildlife, rabbits, raccoons, lots of different birds.
And did I see a red-headed woodpecker a few
Yes,
minutes ago?
every year I've had babies.
If ever there was a patriotic bird, an all-American Uncle Sam bird, it's the red-headed woodpecker, for no other bird is all red, white, and blue. It is well named, too. While most woodpeckers have some red on their heads, the red-headed is the only one with an all-red head from the shoulders up. Yet redheads are not as common as most bird gardeners would like, and the Perrys are fortunate to see them often. They require groves of large trees and often compete with European starlings for nesting cavities. But if they are successful, they will raise 5 youngsters per brood that will emerge from the nest with brown, not red heads. The loblollies attract a great many birds, offering an evergreen canopy and sturdy trunks where insects are found. Here's another southern woodpecker with a red head, but it's called the red-bellied. Take a close look at this jackhammer with feathers. Where's the red belly? Well, it's been misnamed somewhat. It has a red belly, but unless the bird is tipped up, you can't see it. Red-bellieds are doing well in bird gardens as far north as Wisconsin and Michigan, consuming seed and suet as well as sipping juice from oranges and sugar water from feeders. Other birds in this southern garden live on the ground. This ground cover is very lush. It looks like English ivy.
That's exactly what it is.
You have sparrows and other kinds of
Sparrows.
ground-inhabiting birds that use
We've
it?
had the rufous-sided towhee that like to basically get in the ivy and back towards the brush.
We could hear an eastern towhee in the underbrush. Scratch, rattle, shuffle. Notice how she shuffles both feet to the rear at the same time. How does she keep from falling on her face? Clever bird, the towhee. Towhees identify themselves with their towhee alarm calls. Because the towhee's rufous flanks resemble the brick red breast of the American robin, it is sometimes called ground robin. Towhees frequent gardens where there are wild and bushy corners in which they can scratch in the leaves in search of insects, seeds, and fruit. They also eat seeds at feeders. Beneath the towhee, we spotted a blue jay in Barbara's impatience. If there is such a thing as a garden bully bird, the blue jay is it. Yet its cunning, thieving, boastful, quarreling behavior is much like that of other members of the crow family to which it belongs. And like other crows, blue jays are very intelligent. Surprisingly, these noisy birds are usually very quiet while nesting and raising young. So quiet, in fact, that you have to be near their nest to hear their whisper call. Despite their bad reputation, blue jays are among America's most beautiful garden birds and frequent visitors to ponds and feeders where they eat sunflower seeds. Cardinals are second to no garden bird north or south. John James Audubon wrote, "In richness of plumage, elegance of motion, and strength of song, the cardinal surpasses all its kindred in the United States." No other garden bird is a more welcome visitor than the northern cardinal. When spring is in the air, the male cardinal's fancy turns to courting his mate. This results in the pair finding a nesting site in dense garden shrubbery, where they build a flimsy nest of twigs and raise 3 to 4 youngsters. Cardinals generally spend the 4 seasons in the same gardens, remaining mated throughout the year. The tufted titmouse is also a year-round resident. It is among the most delightful of garden birds in the South, a vivacious bundle of energy that darts into the feeder, removes a seed, and then flits to a nearby branch. It cracks the seed open with its tiny, sharp black bill. As soon as the shell flies, the bird is back to the feeder for another seed or off to its nesting site in a birdhouse or tree cavity. Tufted titmice used to be considered southern birds, but they have expanded their range into the Northeast and upper Midwest. And of course, the mockingbirds are everywhere, aren't they?
Oh, yes, they're
Great
definitely
singers.
a good southern favorite down here.
Well, the habitat's just right for mockingbirds. There's a lot of shrubbery here. I'm sure they're nesting and perhaps over there next to the garage.
Right, in the holly bushes. They like the holly bushes.
Holly and mockingbirds go together in southern gardens like magnolias and azaleas. Mockingbirds love to eat the red berries and often nest in the holly's fortress of evergreen leaves. What a northern mockingbird lacks in beauty, it more than makes up for in song and dramatic display. Barbara, why have you done all this? What are the rewards that you have from your bird garden?
It provides a lot of tranquility in our life. It's a reward at the end of a busy day. I get to come home to this, enjoy all the beautiful birds, and there's nothing like it in the whole world.
It's your escape, isn't it?
It is my escape, definitely.
A lot of people feel that way. You're not alone. When traveling in Southern California, you may be looking for stars in places like Hollywood and Beverly Hills. The stars we were looking for were garden birds, and we found them in a subdivision north of Los Angeles. From the front, the Saugus, California home of Bob and Linda Moss looked like it had a typical subdivision layout. What a surprise when we entered their garden, and the birds were everywhere. My overall impression of your yard is one of great beauty, lots of cover, and lots of birds coming in from all directions.
We have kind of 3 zones here. The back zone, the furthest zone up there, the chaparral, is wild, dependent on rainfall, and a lot of cover for birds to nest in the wild. And then we pull them down into our yard by increasing things for them down here.
We watched Anna's hummingbirds, the most common hummer in California, sip sugar water from feeders and nectar from the bee balm, coral bells, and honeysuckle in Moss's garden. The male Anna's is brilliantly adorned with a rose-red crown and throat patch. His courtship flights are wild affairs in which he climbs high in the sky and then dives straight down toward the mostly green female and utters a soft peek in her ear.
Also, we put a lot of food out for the birds to bring them into the yard. Bob puts bird seed out every day.
The birds spread it so much when it falls out of the feeders that quail come in. They're just right now bringing the little ones in.
These California quail chicks are only a couple days old, and yet they already know how to find food by scratching the dirt for seeds and insects. Just after sunrise and again before sunset, quail come down from the chaparral to the garden where they gather bird seeds. After eating, the chicks are brooded by the parents to protect them from the heat.
There's an area right in back of the fence there where the dirt is real dry and fine, and I rake it, and they like to take dust baths back there, particularly the quail.
Dust bathing is another midday activity of quail. The unpaired males of the covey are the birds heard crowing most often, trying to attract mates. There are usually more males than females, making competition fierce.
And the water, we have the pool and the waterfall, and when we turn off the waterfall, there's a little pond, and the birds love to come and take bird baths, and we get our binoculars out and really enjoy watching them. And the yard was planned with the amount of rainfall in mind. We have a lot of rosemary that is covering the hill over here, and that's very drought resistant. It's also very good for the birds. It's very pretty, lots of bees and lots of birds. They like the seeds, and it smells very good. We use it for cooking too.
I can believe that. Of all the bird gardens we visited, this one presented water most beautifully for birds and for people.
One of the birds that we enjoy most of all is the Bullock's oriole, and we have a lot of those around. They're just so beautiful, so colorful, and we put up feeders to attract them.
Until recently, the Bullocks of the West and the Baltimore oriole of the East were considered the same species, and both were called northern oriole. Except for the greater amount of white on the wings and less black on the head, the male Bullock's does resemble the male Baltimore, and his liquid flute-like song is similar. Both have sweet tooths and spend a great deal of time at sugar water feeders. These female Bullocks are much duller overall. The Mosses obviously get a great deal of enjoyment from their beautiful bird garden.
We enjoy it. It's quite nice to come home after commuting on the freeways and working a stressful job and come out, and I love to go and play in the flowers. I consider it entertainment. A lot of it, it's just entertainment. It's not really that hard.
It's an escape from the routine of the daily life.
Welcome back to Wisconsin. I want to show you my bird garden. Actually, it's in several sections. This is what we call the back garden. And right here is where we eat at least 2 of our meals a day. So this area here is very important. We want it to be very active with birds, and it is. We have planted low-growing flowers here. This is a rock garden. And then we have spirea and potentilla planted here. And then these annuals, of course. The red flowers will attract hummingbirds. And then we have the hummingbird feeder here. But we also have this water area, which is very active, particularly during the summertime. Notice how we designed it so that the water spreads out and down, lots of noise. It attracts lots of birds. There's some shallow areas in here so that the birds can get their feet right in the water. This female rose-breasted grosbeak is a frequent visitor to the water. Like most female birds, she is colored to blend with her surroundings. In sharp contrast, the resplendent male rose-breasted is a symphony of color and song. This too is by design to attract a mate and defend the territory. By the time the fledglings join their parents at the feeders, the adult males are showing signs of changing from their breeding plumage to plainer winter garbs. And then one day in late summer, the rose-breasteds are gone from the garden for another year. If there could be only one bird in the garden the year round, the chickadee would be the first choice of many people. This winsome little gray and black 1/3 ounce ball of fluff is so quick that it can change directions in midair in 3/100ths of a second. Its chickadee-dee-dee call and the male spring song are as delightful to hear as the bird is to see. A well-shrubed and tree garden should attract a chickadee pair to a birdhouse or to a cavity in a rotted tree. Gardeners searching for signs of spring revel when a flash of blue lands on a fence post, flits a wing, and warbles a soft, melodious song. Another bluebird summer has begun. The male eastern bluebird wears the velvet blue of the sky on his back and the reddish brown of the earth on his breast. The female is a paler version of the male. Together they select a birdhouse at the edge of the garden. Both parents feed the hatchlings a variety of insects for about 3 weeks until the youngsters are on their own. At garden feeders, bluebirds may eat fruits, berries, or mealworms. Now I'd like to show you the garden along the side of the house. Here we have landscaped the cover in tiers. That way, we can see all the life zones from the kitchen window or from the dining room. We've also added food. This Oriole feeder has sugar water in it, and the Orioles land here and we can watch them up close. Beautiful birds. This Oriole's weight on the perch uncovers the feeder port, allowing the handsome bird to sip its fill. The Oriole feeder is a breakthrough in bird feeding that allows us to enjoy these spectacular birds close up throughout the spring and summer. The male striking colors are reason enough to make the Baltimore Oriole a favorite garden bird, but enjoyment of his flute-like song is another good reason to keep him happy at the sugar water. His drab-colored mate is one of nature's most skilled weavers who creates a deep, hanging, pouch-like nest from the end of a branch some 60 feet above the ground. Using her bill as a needle, she weaves the masterpiece with strips of plant fibers and hair. Hi, honey. I'm home. The classic doves of North America, mourning doves, seem to be everywhere, and it seems that there's no garden without them. The pair builds a flimsy nest on an evergreen bough and raises 2 youngsters in each of several broods a year. They are consummate builders, continuing to add to the nest even while incubating eggs. Now I'd like to show you the front of the house. This is our front garden. It's the garden I look out upon from my office, which is just on the other side of that glass. I do all my writing in there, and it's really neat to be writing about birds, let's say cardinals for example, and look up and see a male cardinal passing a sunflower seed to his mate. We maintain a large container garden here in the summertime. Lots of red flowers. We have geraniums and salvia and impatiens. The hummingbirds love them. They'll approach each blossom and sip the nectar. They'll also use the sugar water feeder hanging over the window there. The dominant male ruby-throated hummingbird in the garden decides who will eat there and who will not. Only loyal females in guard birds' harem are allowed to sip all the sugar water and flower nectar their pudgy little tummies can hold. After he has bred each of his females, guard birds' domestic duties are completed. It is the responsibility of a female to fashion a tiny nest of lichens and plant fibers and to raise 2 youngsters. To survive, baby hummingbirds have to excel in sword swallowing, for it is their mother's long, sharp bill that is the delivery system for nectar and insects to their hungry bellies. Another hot spot is this pond behind me here. Late in the summer particularly, it's very busy. Birds come in and splash around, drink, and when the baby birds are out of the nest, it gets even busier. It's quite a sight. No American garden is complete without its band of goldfinches, the wild canaries of North America. Their bright and cheerful presence and their perchicory calls are part and parcel of the summer flower garden. But the time for American goldfinches is late July. They have been waiting for the thistles to mature. They feed their young regurgitated thistle seeds in the form of so-called canary milk. No matter where you live in North America, you can have a bird garden. And regardless of the size of your property, whether it's a 2-acre tract or just a balcony on a condo, if you provide cover, food, and water, the birds will come. This is George Harrison, the Backyard Bird Watcher.
This is PBS.